Hi, I'm Lieutenant Colonel Marty Lepche, Commandant of the Tactics School within the Combat Training Center at CFB Gagetown. And with my command team partner, Chief Warrant Officer Dave Poss, we are honored to bring you this important video on resiliency training. This video will provide you with the basic fundamentals of resilience in order to better prepare yourselves for high-stress environments to include combat operations. The Tactics School training philosophy is based on the warrior's ethos that is grounded by fundamental principles such as honor, integrity, courage, and a professional bearing. Building on this solid foundation are three pillars that must be fully developed in order to achieve a high level of preparedness for full-spectrum operations. These pillars are the intellectual, physical, and mental attributes required of a warrior. This video will focus on the last pillar, resilience, and its impact on operations. The warriors have been studying tactics for centuries and understand the importance of mental toughness. It is the modern soldier who appreciates the importance of understanding the inner workings of the brain and the effects of stressors on leaders and their soldiers. As a result of the evidence-based science for mental health clinicians incorporated with battlefield experience of our soldiers, we are now able to better prepare our soldiers to face stressful situations head-on in order to complete our mission with a greater degree of success. This resilience training is being delivered to both soldiers and officers through their development periods and is based on a progressive building block concept. As leaders progress through their various career courses, they'll be able to build upon their knowledge of resilience, but more importantly, understand the critical role they play in ensuring that their soldiers are mentally prepared for the challenging tasks that they will be assigned. It is envisioned that both streams, NCM and officer, will culminate on the command team course. The intent of this video is to provide all of our Army personnel with a common start state as pertains to resilience training. Subsequent training through the DP system for both NCMs and officers will increase one's knowledge and capability. Our experts in the field have carefully studied numerous models from various nations to include the Navy SEALs, the Marine Corps, the Australian Defence Force, and of course our own experiences and knowledge within the Canadian Forces and its Army. Our training experts have determined the best time and amount of training to be delivered throughout one's career in order to mentally strengthen our force. Finally, this video would not have been possible without the input from our own soldiers and their leaders, who understand extreme stress and how to deal with it. Our intent is to institutionalize this understanding through the timely delivery of resilience training to CF Army personnel and challenge our leaders to incorporate this knowledge into their own leadership.
We are learning more now about the brain than at any other time in history, how it's put together and how it operates. The more we learn about the brain, the more we realize how it affects every aspect of our lives, including improving military performance. Your brain does not remain static, and there are ways to improve its performance. Like the muscles of your body, your brain gets stronger when it's given a workout. Just within the last 10 years have we begun to understand that elite performance, whether on the battlefield or on the sports field, is all about training the brain. The brain dictates how people will respond to extreme stress. So understanding how it operates, the human body's response to this stress, and how to develop and incorporate brain training techniques into military exercises is key to managing operational stress.
I think it's absolutely essential when it comes to preparing soldiers for combat that they are able to understand in terms of stress what they may experience on the battlefield. Specifically, they need to understand what's normal on the battlefield, and if they aren't stressed in a training environment in exercises before they go on, they're not going to have a benchmark in terms of what's normal both on the physical and the mental scale. So soldiers need to understand what they're going to go through, what's normal, so that when they experience it in combat and they see casualties and they see the emotionally charged battlefield that is part of modern warfare, they have a benchmark for what's normal.
Prevention and resilience is critical to the Canadian Forces Health Services. Despite the focus on treatment of health services organizations, any resort to treatment is a failure of prevention and promotion of health. So anything that we can do to protect against the development of mental health conditions or any other physiological health problem, we need to address. And mental health resiliency training is particularly critical in that it can serve just the same way a vaccine can serve against protecting against infection, or personal protective equipment against injury resulting from directed energy weapons. In some ways, the prevention of mental health conditions is more critical than the prevention of other types of illnesses because it not only affects the patient, but it also can affect the patient's loved ones, as well as requiring often, in many cases, much longer period to recover.
Why train your brain? Why put effort and energy into developing mental skills? The most compelling reason is that you are doing it anyway. Every day you are giving yourself certain messages about what kind of soldier you are and what you are capable of.
It's really important to train our brain for military operation because your brain is controlling all your body. And you know, it's like we've got a multitude of tasks on the battlefield to do, and your brain's going to have to analyze a lot of stuff, and in a very, very short period of time. And that's why it's extremely important to train your brain. And that's why, like, during the training cycle or any kind of exercise for the soldier on the ground, is like it's to give him as close as possible the reality of the battlefield, to train your brain and to make sure like your brain will react the same way the brain will react on the battlefield.
Resilience is the capacity of a soldier to recover quickly, resist, and possibly even thrive in the face of direct, indirect traumatic events and adverse situations in garrison, training, and operational environments.
The term military resilience applies to everyone and all levels of warfare, where one has to have a personal capacity to face the most extreme circumstances and continue, or simply face the grind of daily operations and be able to continue. At the same time, military resiliency also applies to our longevity. You might be have the capacity to keep fighting, to keep doing your job on any given day or any given tour, but we also want you to be able to do it on future tours. And so military resilience applies to the mission focus as well as to the warrior ethos and your longevity as a warrior in the armed forces, such that you can repeat that.
Stress is not all bad. In fact, science has determined that not enough stress is just as harmful on performance as too much stress. The ideal or optimal level of stress for effective performance is above a soldier's comfort zone, but not unmanageable. Training the brain is about arousal modulation, not getting too high or too low, but staying in the zone for optimal performance. Sports psychology has been using these brain training techniques for years to enhance the performance of great athletes.
We have a wide array of mental skills that we use both with the military and with athletes. And on a motivational level, I think one of the big things we need to talk about is what I call the reason why. People need to know why they do what they do. Understanding and having a sense of purpose is very important in terms of directing an individual's behavior, decision making, willingness to sacrifice. If you don't have a purpose, it's pretty hard to put your body on the line.
In addition to improving effectiveness and preparedness, the goal of resilience training is also to sustain long-term well-being. While research has demonstrated that training the brain will improve performance, it has also been suggested that the same techniques may play a protective role in mitigating mental illness. Like all protective gear, in order for them to be effective, you need to use the skills provided. However, like the helmet or flak jacket, the use of these skills is not a 100% guarantee of health, but it does decrease the likelihood of less favorable outcomes. The structure of the brain has evolved like an old house, where we just added different rooms and where there are all these stairways and connections. In the basement is the oldest part, called the brain stem. It's something we share with reptiles and other mammals. It's what keeps us alive, governing vital functions like heart rate, respiration, digestion, and blood pressure, things that happen without having to think about them. The next level up, the first floor, more evolved hundreds of thousands of years later, called the limbic system. The limbic system processes information. It coordinates and refines movement and is very important in the processing of emotions. Within the limbic system are the amygdala, two tiny almond-shaped nuggets of tissue, one in each half of the brain. These are the central command center for our emotional reactions. If the limbic system is the first floor, the cortex is the second floor of the brain. It's the brain's thin, wrinkly outer layer that's divided into 4 sets of lobes. Many mammals possess a cortex, but it is much larger and more highly developed in humans. The frontal lobes comprise the area just above our eyes, and these are the newest rooms of the brain. As humans evolved, the frontal lobes became the place where conscious, rational thought is processed. It's where we do our problem solving. In order to be more effective, we need to understand what happens in the brain in response to fear and panic.
Whoa! Holy shit!
As mentioned earlier, the amygdala plays a central role in the processing of emotions. One of the simplest and strongest of these is fear, a primal emotion we all share.
The amygdala is a very small structure in the brain that serves as a sentinel that's always on, even when we're sleeping. It can also be compared to the alarm system in a house. We've been comparing the brain to a house with many levels, and in that house, the amygdala would be the alarm system. We wouldn't ask the alarm system of our house to distinguish between a robber or the wind breaking a window. We expect our alarm system to function very rapidly and alert us to anything. We need to have a much more evolved, much more sophisticated part of our brain, not a primitive part like the amygdala, to rely on to make those refined discriminations.
When confronted with danger, humans respond immediately with an alarm reaction that triggers a defense response. This defense response has been termed fight, flight, or freeze, as it describes the 3 options for survival: flee from the danger, flight; render the danger inoperative, fight; or stand very still in an effort to camouflage ourselves in the environment, freeze. This fast response of the amygdala has the evolutionary advantage of preparing the body for the worst-case scenario. The amygdala triggers a chain reaction that sends adrenaline and cortisol hormones into the body's bloodstream. These stress hormones act as a SWAT team, quickly preparing the body for action. They increase breathing, heart rate, and blood pressure. Senses become keener, memory sharper, and the body becomes less sensitive to pain. The suppression of pain in the face of danger is well documented among soldiers in combat and lets them concentrate their energies on the highest priority threat. Even after the threat has passed, the body continues to be on guard for any future threats in the environment.
The situation I'll describe to you was one that involved the combat team that I was commanding in September of 2007 in the Panjwai district in Afghanistan. We were conducting a link-up slash resupply operation as part of a battle group operation. We were heading down a particular route, and my lead troop had an IED strike. Conducted its drills, et cetera, I was making sure that that troop was good to go and was about to step off again on operations. I felt my entire combat team sort of freeze. It was early in the operation, our first sort of IED strike, and I turned to my loader in my tank and I said, right, the squadron or combat team is kind of frozen, we need to step off. And so as I rolled my tank forward into an area that I had been led to believe had been cleared, we had a second IED strike. And my first reaction in terms of fight, flight, and freeze was to fight. And I remember reaching for my Presso switch, located in the center of my jacket, to put out on my combat team net that it was contact IED strike, wait out. So in terms of instinct at that point, I think what I really felt was the world started focusing and really instinct began the initial part of my reaction to that particular incident.
Scientists made a major breakthrough in fear research when they found that information from our senses reaches the amygdala almost twice as fast as it takes to get to our frontal lobes. During the defense response, we do not have access to the cortex part of the brain that allows us to think and reason. This part of the brain is much slower than the more primitive portions of the brain described earlier. Therefore, the brain is not designed to think during the event, a process that is too slow and would result in our demise. It is a short, more direct route in our brain that lets us start preparing for a potential danger before we even know exactly what it is. In some situations, these precious fractions of a second can mean the difference between life and death. However, the speed of the different brain signals means unless we instinctively know how to react to a potential threat, we may freeze in fear, waiting for the frontal lobes to catch up to figure out the right response.
The amygdala is an alarm system, and you can have false alarms. So it's a very primitive part of the brain, and it can certainly give us situations, whether we're ill or healthy, that there's dangerous situation when it's really not.
In order to understand the emotions, you also have to understand the neocortex. The neocortex is the much more evolved complex brain structure that turns down the dial on the amygdala, that manages and modulates emotions.
And another fantastic example is military training itself. I mean, the repetition, the doing the same thing over and over again in different scenarios, in a classroom, in the field, in the dark, is simply to have the cortex, the doing part of the body, override whatever fear, whatever immediate sort of primitive reactions are in the body. So military training lends itself, in a way, to controlling the amygdala.
Realistic training enhances skill development and provides accurate knowledge of what to expect in any given operational environment. The Canadian Forces has recognized this need and is constantly searching out new, more advanced means to train operators.
When you're designing training, if it's not realistic, then I would say, why do you design it? All right, at the simulation center, the use of simulation is just a logical process in the learning curve for students. The technologies that we now have, the JCATs and the VBS2, offers such high fidelity that students, when they prepare their plan, put it into the computers, they actually get a chance to see how that works and get to test their plan. And we have feedback from students that say, hey, I feel more prepared when I go out into the field if I get a chance to do it in simulation first. And if you can introduce things such as simulation, when you're out on a range where a student knows that if they don't apply those techniques and procedures that they've practiced in simulation, that there's going to be a result, i.e. they're going to get shot.
Neuroscience has taught us that the body and brain can be induced to relax and lessen the impact of stress by employing techniques that lower blood pressure and slow heartbeat.
The stress response works very much like a car with the gas pedal and the brake. That's actually a good analogy to explain how the autonomic nervous system works. One part works as the gas pedal and the other one works to slow down the stress response by pressing the brake. And you're not going to be in good control of your car if you don't have both the gas and the brake pedal in good working order.
Whatever was dilated, accelerated, or increased by the sympathetic nervous system is contracted, decelerated, or decreased by the parasympathetic nervous system. The key to effective performance is the ability to slow the body down and keep arousal levels at the optimal level for peak performance. The U.S. Naval Special Warfare Center has been studying various training techniques to override the stress response system. They have discovered there are 4 main skills that can reduce the Navy SEAL candidates' stress response and improve their performance. These are the same skills used by our own elite training force, the Joint Task Force 2. The big 4 are goal setting, mental rehearsal or visualization, self-talk, and arousal control through tactical breathing. While each of these skills is effective at managing stress, combining the 4 skills has a powerful effect on controlling the amygdala. Scientists think goal setting works by assisting the frontal lobes. As the brain's supervisor, the frontal lobes are responsible for reasoning and planning. Concentrating on specific goals lets the brain bring structure to chaos and keeps the amygdala, the emotional center of the brain, in check. The brain works more efficiently when it focuses on one task at a time. One of the key aspects of goal setting is breaking tasks down into small, manageable pieces.
Goal setting gives us not only does it give us a sense of purpose, it also gives us a sense of control, because we can feel ourselves moving towards things, and obviously if the goals are stated correctly, they also give us a very task-appropriate focus that we require in order to do our job.
Goal setting can be used both individually and collectively. Individually, setting goals is a process that allows people to specify, then work towards their own objectives. Collectively, goal setting for leaders within the CF is an effective tool for ensuring your subordinates are clearly aware of what is expected from them if an objective is to be achieved, especially when the risk level is high, such as it is in operations. In Army speak, goals canalize behavior. A soldier's motivation will increase if they participate in the goal-setting process and if the goals themselves are challenging.
Je trouve que c'est très important d'avoir des buts.
I believe that it is very important to have goals, fixed goals. Let it be short, medium, or long term. As an example, if I relate to my experience on my operational tour in the summer of 2008, I was employed as a signaler for an artillery observation post party. It was a 7-month-long deployment. Therefore, I made up a calendar with all the important taskings that I had to do during those months. Then I divided those months into weeks. Each week I had taskings to do, and I further divided those weeks into days. Therefore, every day, as I was getting up, I knew exactly what I had to do. I knew what I was heading for. Then I carried on with my weeks until such time as I reached my HLTA, which happened to be around mid-tour. Therefore, I had half of my tour done, 50% of my tasks completed. So after, I just had to carry on.
In previous deployment as an operator with counter ID, it's almost a game of cat and mouse, really, right? So you have to set up that goal of today, I'm simply going to go out and come back alive, but do my job properly. And do that on a daily basis. Well, at the end of the tour, you're coming home safe and you're coming home having conducted a 8-month productive tour.
While goal setting may come easily to some, others struggle a great deal with it. However, goal setting is a skill, and if you remember these key SMART points, it can be learned. Goals must include a specific behavior that you take. You cannot make goals for others. You have to be able to see progress. If you can't measure it, then how do you know when you've achieved it? Goals must be attainable and possible to achieve. A good goal is out of reach, but not out of sight. Goals need to be relevant and motivate you. They must be either desirable or necessary. You must either want it or need it. You need to know when you have achieved the goal. There needs to be a finish line, so you will know when you get there. The second technique, mental rehearsal or visualization, is continually running through an activity in your brain, so when you try it